Practical application. Following on from the preceding descriptions of the various kinds of wise reflection, there are some miscellaneous points here to review, re-emphasize. By examining how wise reflection operates, one sees that it functions during two stages. First, when one cognizes sense impressions, or when one experiences things from outside, and second, when one contemplates sense impressions, or when one examines matters that one has stored up internally. One of the noteworthy characteristics of cognizing things wisely is to simply know them accurately, and to provide mindfulness with useful data to use in one's everyday life and activities. In other words, one cognizes things for the benefit of mindfulness and wisdom. This differs from cognition that leads to misunderstanding, conflict, attachment, and mental corruption. One gains knowledge as a result of one's experiences rather than allowing experiences or sense impressions to dominate or delude the mind. Otherwise, instead of gaining knowledge in order to solve problems and to eliminate suffering, one accumulates mental defilements and intensifies suffering. These same principles also apply to the act of thinking, and they help to distinguish a life conducted with wisdom. Some people may complain that this so-called life of wisdom appears emotionless, barren, and insipid. The response to this is that emotions tend to dominate the lives of ordinary people almost continuously. Wise reflection simply eases people's suffering and mitigates their problems. There is no worry that they will be void of emotions. Someone who applies wise reflection successfully to the extent of transcending the state of an ordinary person, Patu Jana, develops the prominent, pure and powerful emotion of true compassion, which augments a person's goodness and kindness. Instead of such emotions as frustration, sadness, stress, loneliness, and worry, one feels more refined emotions like joy, delight, happiness, mental clarity and spaciousness, peace and inner freedom. Note that the two preliminary stages of the middle way, good instruction from others and wise reflection, comprise the link between people and the world. They emphasize one's external environment before one enters upon the Noble Eightfold Path, which consists of internal spiritual factors. Virtuous friendship, Kalyanamita, equals wholesome instruction from others, highlights the correct relationship between people and the world in respect to their community, and wise reflection highlights the correct relationship between people and the world from the perspective of the mind, that is, of the way in which one experiences sense impressions and the way in which one thinks. This latter factor refers to the way of wisdom, or of discerning things as they really are, as explained earlier. The different kinds of wise reflection described above follow the presentations in the Buddhist scriptures. It is important that students of Buddhism not get stuck on these conventional formats or on a set terminology, but rather focus on the essential meaning of these teachings. Note also that the principles of wise reflection are intended to be used in a practical way, offering continuous benefit to one's life. They are not meant to be used only when one is faced with tricky matters for consideration, or when one is in solitude. Rather, they can be applied at all times. This process begins with one's general relationship to people and to the world, and with the course of one's thoughts and reflections, when one experiences various things, of not creating suffering, generating problems, or causing harm. Instead, one's thoughts and actions promote happiness for oneself and others, increase wisdom and other wholesome qualities, cultivate virtuous habits and personal attributes, foster knowledge of the truth, and tie in with a spiritual training leading to liberation. Take for an example a young boy from a wealthy family sitting in a car along with his parents. At one point he looks out the window and sees a group of poor children dressed in rags. The boy is fascinated because he recognizes the difference between himself and those other children. His parents notice his interest and say, "Those are filthy children, don't pay attention to them." In such a circumstance, the parents are equivalent to bad friends, Papa Mita, advising the child to think in an unwise manner, and then inducing unwholesome states like aversion and contempt. These negative feelings may develop into the boy's general viewpoint towards poor people, or even into a bias against all people. In the same kind of circumstances, however, another set of parents may say, "Those unfortunate children, their parents are poor, and therefore they do not have any decent clothes to wear. We should try and help them." In this case, the parents act as virtuous friends, Kalyana Mitta, helping to establish the child in wise reflection and inducing wholesome qualities like loving kindness, compassion, and renunciation. These positive feelings may develop into the child's outlook towards poor people, and then to his general perspective towards all people. The same holds true in other situations. Take, for example, the way in which news is broadcast in the media, both in relation to good news and bad. The expressed attitudes on speech by adults is highly influential in shaping the thought patterns of children. If adults point out correct ways of thinking and a discernment that is aligned with truth and conducive to wholesome qualities, the spiritual growth of children will be greatly enhanced. Food, clothing, textbooks, the road to school, and those people or events encountered on the way to school, all of these things can influence the thoughts and shape a wholesome or unwholesome response in children. Very important in this context, however, is the way in which the perspectives and values of children are moulded by the advice given to them by both virtuous and immoral companions, leading to either wise or unwise reflection. As for adults, when they understand these principles, they will be able to apply wise reflection to rectify negative attitudes and habits, even those which have been accumulated and compounded by unwise reflection for a long time. Note also that in the same situation, where several people all apply wise reflection, the kinds and levels of wise reflection may differ. Take an example connected to the stages of tranquility, samatha, and insight vipassana. One man sees the face of a beautiful young woman, but instead of focusing on the beauty of her face, he sees it as comprised of skin and facial hair, along with the unattractive elements of grease, sweat, and dust, and with bones and flesh beneath. In this way, lust does not arise in him. The wise reflection applied here is considered an aspect of tranquility meditation, reflection on the repulsive paticula manasikara, because the experiences of the repulsive quelling lust, leading to a peaceful mind. The second man sees the same beautiful woman, but he sees her as a young person who ought to be looked after and cared for. He generates the feeling of loving kindness, considering her like a younger sister or niece. The wise reflection applied here is also an aspect of tranquility meditation, an expression of the divine abiding of loving kindness, because it makes the mind peaceful and pure. A woman sees this beautiful woman and thinks, her face is more beautiful than mine. She begins to feel envy and dislike. This is a form of unwise reflection, because it generates unwholesome states and causes suffering and anguish. The third man sees this woman and sees her face as comprised of various physical parts, made up of different elements. As a whole, they are conventionally referred to as the face of this woman with such and such a name. This woman's face is nothing more than a physical thing. It is impermanent, unstable, subject to change, existing according to causes and conditions, morally neutral. Ultimately, it is neither beautiful nor repulsive. This kind of reflection is in line with insight meditation, because the person sees the object as it really is, according to the truth. Wise reflection, yoniso manasikara, is the principal factor initiating spiritual training, or it is the pillar of wisdom development, especially in systematic or formal study. Should thus be given great importance. One should help people seek knowledge themselves, rather than try to educate people by telling them what to think or believe, which is often a misguided and fruitless effort. To begin with, one can develop educational methods and activities that encourage students to train in the two basic forms of wise reflection: the investigation of causes and conditions, and the analysis of component factors. When the students encounter situations requiring contemplation, they can link these two kinds of reflection with the reflection in accord with the three universal characteristics, and the reflection used to solve problems, reflection in accord with the Four Noble Truths. The other kinds of reflection then provide support as is suitable. With this guidance, the students begin to apply wise reflection independently and progress in spiritual practice truly and correctly. When teachers know how to incorporate wise reflection in their curriculum, even young children will develop a profound thinking, broad perspective. By looking at their notebooks, writing desks, they will begin to see the interrelationship and interdependence between all things in the universe. They will discern that the arising and existence of one thing does not happen in isolation. It is inseparable from the existence of other things. In answer to the questions, how did this desk come to be? What is required in order for this desk to come into existence? The child would trace back to the necessary causes and search for all the factors required in the creation of a desk. For example, wood, a saw, nails, a hammer, human labourers. From these they will trace it even further back, say from the wood to trees, and from trees to soil, water, rain, forests, climate, and weather. Besides giving rise to a clear understanding of subjects under consideration and of all their related factors, a skill in wise reflection also leads to insight and realization, which effectuates change, even on the level of viewpoints and personality. For example, one realizes that to live well and experience true happiness, one must respect other people and respect nature, carefully protect and preserve natural resources. Those people skilled at wise reflection will look for and recognize those aspects of things that are beneficial and apply them for well-being and prosperity in their lives at all times and in all circumstances. Despite encountering poverty, illness, or misfortune, these people do not feel discouraged or helpless. Instead, these difficult and challenging experiences become the source of wisdom and other virtues. Indeed, one sometimes hears people say, "It was good luck that I was born poor," or "It was good luck that I became so ill at that time." Similarly, there are stories in the scriptures of some people who hear the words of a madman and consequently realize the truth and are completely freed from mental impurity. Conversely, some people, despite being born rich, physically beautiful, or with prestige, lack wise reflection. Instead of their apparent good luck acting as an asset or support for achieving true success with speed and convenience, it increases and intensifies craving, conceit, and wrong view, along with fostering laziness, infatuation, and competitiveness. Their good luck is transformed into bad luck, and they find no true fulfillment. Most people have accumulated the habit over a long period of time of thinking in ways that satisfy craving, or thinking based on likes and dislikes, preferences and aversions. These different kinds of wise reflection help to train the mind to develop new habits. Developing new habits may take a long time because old habits have been accumulated for decades, but the effort is worthwhile because wise reflection increases wisdom, solves problems, dispels delusion and suffering, and generates joy and luminosity. Even if not perfected, wise reflection can still aid in fostering equilibrium, providing a way out when old habits lead one into trouble, into various forms of suffering, helps one to turn towards safety and freedom. Technically speaking, from the perspective of functionality, various kinds of wise reflection can be classified into two types. 1. Reflection cultivating power of mind. This type of reflection aims for mobilizing virtuous, wholesome qualities. It emphasizes hindering or suppressing craving. It belongs to tranquility meditation, samatha. Its characteristic is generating the strength or degree of goodness to constrain or conceal the unwholesome. Its results are temporary and dependent on time. It promotes spiritual preparedness and builds character. It leads to mundane right view. 2. Reflection, cultivating pure wisdom. This type of reflection aims for comprehensive knowledge of the truth or of reality. It emphasizes the eradication of ignorance. It belongs to insight meditation, vipassana. Its characteristic is illumination of dispelling delusion or cleansing what is impure. Its fruits are timeless or absolute, and it leads to transcendent right view. Appendix 1. Reflection in accord with the Four Noble Truths and reflection based on science. The Buddhist teachings describe many methods of wise reflection which can be applied separately for different situations, or combined and applied together for one specific situation. In contemporary society, wise reflection is often referred to as the scientific method. One can also refer to the scientific method as analysis for solving problems, which corresponds here with reflection in accord with the Four Noble Truths. Let us compare these two methods of reflection. The scientific method has 5 stages. 1. Location of problems. 2. setting up of an hypothesis. 3. Experimentation and gathering of data. 4. Analysis of data. 5. Conclusion. Note that this method includes the important function of investigating causes, which is intrinsic to the second stage. The hypothesis may be directly based on the conjecture of a specific cause, or a cause provides clear evidence for establishing an hypothesis. There are times, however, when the evidence does not clearly point to one distinct hypothesis, and therefore one must form any provisional hypothesis. In the method of reflecting on and investigating the Four Noble Truths, the search for causes is designated as a separate stage. Moreover, the Four Truths are classified into two separate groups as follows. A. Natural processes in line with nature. These stages are to be reached by knowledge, by reflecting on and knowing things according to the truth which exists independently. 1. The stage of recognizing suffering, dukkha, to know the nature of suffering, or the nature of one's problems, to know where suffering manifests and to know its extent or range equals the location of problems. 2. The stage of investigating causes, samudaya, to discern the causes of suffering or of one's problems equals, this stage is not distinguished in the scientific method. 3. The stage of drawing an inference to cessation, nirodha, to examine the potentiality of cessation and the manner by which problems may be truly solved equals setting up of an hypothesis. B. Methodology of human beings. The stage needs to be practiced and applied. 4. Following the path, magga. This stage can be subdivided into 3 stages. Path number 1, asana or gavesana, and including vimamsana, seeking verification. Experimentation equals experimentation and gathering of data. Path number 2, vimamsa or pavichara, inspection, separation, selecting those factors that are correct and valid equals analysis of data. Path number 3, anubodha, awakening, isolating those factors that are incorrect, apprehending or choosing the truth path, which leads to the solution to one's problems equals conclusion. Here are these 4 stages in greater detail. 1. Recognition of suffering. Human beings experience myriad kinds of suffering, affliction and difficulty, both physical and mental, both internal and external. A basic form of suffering, however, refers to those things that are oppressive because they thwart, oppose and conflict with people's desires and cherished ideas. Human problems or suffering comes in many different forms according to various locations and time periods, and thus one must apply those solutions appropriate and specific to these conditions. The basic form of suffering referred to above, however, is inherently connected to human life and to human nature, regardless of whether one lives alone or with others. This suffering follows people constantly. It manifests and issues effects, irrespective of whether people have solved those problems owing to specific times and places. Addressing this basic form of suffering is a regular and constant responsibility for people. The degree by which one rectifies this basic suffering will have an effect on every other kind of suffering or difficulty, both their level of intensity and one's ability to deal with them. Addressing this basic suffering is thus the most fundamental and supreme benefit for human life. Other suffering and difficulties must be dealt with at another stage, as suits the circumstances. 2. Investigation of causes in order to envision a solution to problems. This stage of investigation is directly linked to the third stage of inferring cessation, i.e., the way in which one draws an inference to cessation depends on how accurately one apprehends the causes to one's problems. Methods A, B, and C. See stage number 3 below. Here one grasps the cause of suffering incorrectly, say by believing that one is experiencing inadequate amounts of pleasure. Alternatively, one neglects to investigate causes altogether. Method D. Here one understands that the cause of suffering is craving, tanha, thus one gains an even deeper insight into dependent origination, paticca samuppada, tracing the cause back to ignorance, avidya. 3. Drawing an inference to cessation, one reckons that suffering ends by one of the following processes. A. By seeking sensual pleasure and indulging oneself to the maximum. B. By developing concentrative attainments, jhana samapatti, according to the way of the yogis, yoga vidhi. C. By developing extreme austerities and through self-mortification. D. By severing the cycle of dependent origination, dispelling ignorance, cutting off craving, being mindful, and conducting one's life with wisdom. 4. Following the path number 1, asana, searching, experimentation. Buddha practiced and experimented with all 4 of the above methods of seeking the end of suffering. He also observed how people and societies live and exist when following each of these 4 methods. Path number 2, vimamsa, inspection, analysis, to analyze one's observations and experimentation. The Buddha recognized, even before his great renunciation, that seeking sensual pleasures does not give true meaning to life or lead to what is essential. Moreover, it leads to affliction. He saw that yogic practices lead only so far as various concentrative attainments, and that severe austerities create torment and affliction in vain. The path of wisdom, entailing the end of ignorance and craving, however, is able to eradicate the root of suffering and leads to true deliverance. Path number 3, Anubodha, awakening, understanding. One realizes that the way of sensuality and the way of severe asceticism are extremes, anta, while the way of the yogis results in getting stuck in the middle. By this latter way, one does not yet reach the path, magga. The correct and true course is the middle way, the Noble Eightfold Path, the way of wisdom, which begins with right view. In Thailand, Dr. Sharoj Buasri has already written about the comparison between the scientific method and the method in accord with the Four Noble Truths. For example, in his book, A Philosophy of Education for Thailand, The Confluence of Buddhism and Democracy. This is praiseworthy work. However, because in the meantime there has been further examination and contemplation on this subject, I have introduced some different ideas. I mentioned in an earlier chapter how the natural law of the 3 characteristics, tilakana, and the law of dependent origination are in fact the same law, but described from different angles. Impermanence and inconsistency produce pressure and conflict, and thus it is natural for there to be fluctuation, anicca, dukkha, viparinama, dhammang. Yet this process occurs according to causes and conditions. Reflecting in this way expands the study of wise reflection to include the method of dialectics, basa, vidi. It would be useful, however, to try and interpret the method of dialectics by applying the mode of detailed analysis, vibhaja vidi. This matter can be reviewed and considered by scholars when there is an opportunity. Appendix 2, Dhamma Nu Dhamma Pati Pati. Following are some definitions in Pali Canon and the commentaries of the term Dhamma Nu Dhamma Pati Pati. To practice correctly in an integrated fashion without obstruction and consistent with the goals of practice, to undertake the initial stages of practice consistent with the 9 super-mundane states, Lokuttara Dhamma, to undertake the initial stages of practice along with virtuous conduct, sila, consistent with the 9 super-mundane states, to undertake the initial stages of practice along with virtuous conduct, sila, to arrive at the goal, the transcendent state, to practice the factors of insight, vipassana, dhamma, which are consistent with the noble truth, ariya dhamma, to practice the path of insight, vipassana magga, conforming to the noble truth, to follow the righteous path, conforming to nibbana, the transcendent state, to develop the subsidiary factor of insight meditation, vipassana bhavana, conforming to the transcendent state. The term Dhamma Nu Dhamma refers to the Dhamma and all its minor parts, Anu Dhamma. Dhamma Nu Dhamma refers to the parts of the Dhamma, those practices compatible with the Dhamma. The 9 supermundane states are called the Dhamma. Qualities such as vipassana, for instance, are called Anu Dhamma, and the practice suitable to the Dhamma is called Anu Dhamma Pati Pada.